Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Mike in the Midwest. We're going to get going here recording the Patreon exclusive podcast. Glad to be back in the studio. So let's get it going. Episode 62. See if we have any feedback here from 61. Yes, we do. Here we go. All right, let's do this. Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. My name, of course, is Mike Ruhlman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast. You can check it out over at beourguestpodcast.com, but I don't need to tell you that. You are super fans of the show, and I appreciate that so very much. How you doing today? I hope it's going well wherever this show finds you around the world. Again, thank you so much for your support. You allow us to get all this done. We really need your support, and it really, really helps us out. So thank you so much for being here. So just back from my Disney cruise, I'll talk a little bit about that on tomorrow's podcast on the Friday show. I sat down with Ricky last night, and we went over some of the highlights. But if you ever have any questions, if you are planning to cruise, if you have a cruise on the books here for the fall or the winter, or if you're just, thinking about it, kind of tossing the idea out there, to shoot me an email if you want any questions answered, because obviously the show went a little bit long. I think we went about 54 minutes on Friday's podcast, but still, that was not even close to being long enough to talk about all the stuff that I wanted to cover, because cruising is definitely different right now, but in many ways it's a little bit better because you got a lot more space. You have a little bit more structure, and you can schedule things a lot easier, and it's a new experience. It's a little bit different. Some things I wish were back to normal, but those will get there eventually. But it was a fun cruise. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of random thoughts here. Kind of the topic of today's show, because I'm catching up from work. Thanks again to Ben Lappin for covering for me here at the Magic for Less while I was out of the office over the weekend. He did a tremendous job with my guests. So, if you worked with Ben, thank you for, understanding he was covering for me, and he did a great job. He's one of our great agents over at the Magic for Less. Okay, so before we jump into today's topic, a bunch of random stuff I just wanted to cover, because, again, I'm kind of catching up from being out of the office for 4 days last week. You know how it is when you get back, everything's there. Got to catch up. But I wanted to recap last week's episode 61. We called it Changes. And we talked about how things change slowly, but kind of quickly when you look back on them from a global or a 30,000 foot perspective. We talked about changes. It all came because, where did I put my Coke? My Coke Zero that used to be in a black can is now in a red can, and it has a new taste. And I will say that the new taste is okay. I've had it now for a week. It's fine. It's going to be fine. And I was talking about this with Bob. He's going to be on our Monday podcast. We were doing a trip report last night. We were talking about his trip with a large group down to Pop Century. And I mentioned Coke Zero, and I told him that this new Coke Zero that I was kind of dreading isn't so bad. It's actually pretty good. And I'm worried that it might be just like a little bit more addictive. Like there's something in it that when you finish the can, makes you want to drink another can. Maybe it's just me, but is Coke that sinister that they would do that? I don't know. So we'll have to see. If you drink Coke Zero, let me know, because it tastes similar, and in a way it tastes a little bit better than the old formula, but there's something different definitely in there. But I got to know what's going on there. We also talked about like the new Coke, the old Coke, Betamax and VHS. Remember the old Crystal Pepsi? We talked about Clippy, things that have changed over the years. We used to have Clippy to help us get everything done when it came to a Word document. I guess now in 2021, we're smart enough. We don't need Clippy bugging us. We talked about stuff that McDonald's served. They served pizza. They served wings. I always do this around lunchtime. Making me hungry. All right, let's get to the feedback from last week's show. Trisha Hellwig. Thanks, Trisha, for being a patron of the show. You're always here, and I appreciate that so much. She says, hope the new Coke Zero is growing on you. Things she remembered that have changed over the years. She says MySpace. Now, I'll tell you what, I really wasn't on MySpace much. And it's not that I wasn't online at that time, because I know MySpace was a big deal. I think that was like a little bit too advanced for me, because, again, remember, I grew up with a Commodore 64 and I ran a bulletin board service, or a BBS, which was kind of like the very first V bulletin message boards. It was a place where you could download games, upload games, play some really primitive online games, but mostly share messages with people within your area code. People could call long distance, but that costs a lot of money. It was mostly people in St. Louis would dial in, post a message, hang up. Somebody else would dial in, read the new messages, post their response, hang up, and it went like that. So I kind of miss MySpace, but I migrated from, I don't know, I doubt anybody will remember this, but let me know if you did here over at patreon.com/BeOurGuestPodcast in the comments. Does anybody remember Q-Link, or what was called Quantum Link? It was a precursor to AOL, basically, and it was only for Commodore computers, but it had a section called People Connection, which was kind of a premium part of the service where you paid extra, but you could live chat with people. It had like a little shopping mall, had like a travel section, a news section. And that's actually what AOL kind of became later on for PCs and kind of all computers. Also, I remember my dad getting us on CompuServe way back in the day. So we had CompuServe. So if you remember any of those services, let me know, because I love hearing about my peeps that were in those same primitive World Wide Web kind of situations early. So let me know. Trish says she also remembers the dial-up tone to the internet and then getting yelled at when you tied up the phone line. Now, I lived that. Okay, so I ran a BBS, which meant I had my Commodore 64 computer in my bedroom. It had I didn't ever have a big hard drive, but I had I had 4 floppy drives hooked up to it of various sizes, 1541s, 71s, and 81s, if you're a Commodore guy or gal. And, but the thing was, I had to have my own phone number because people called in. And so when I first started the BBS, I did run it off our main house phone number, but then I only ran it from like 9 at night till 7 in the morning, because that way the phone line was open for regular use during the day. But people didn't respect that. They would call at any time. So one year for Christmas, my dad got me my own phone number. It was 314-921-4269. Still remember it. And you could call and, get in. And the thing was, I do remember like that screechy, you get in there, and then yes. And if so when you downloaded software too, the one thing you wanted to avoid was, because I had a younger sister, you'd be downloading some killer game like Raid Over Moscow or Leaderboard Golf, something like that, Pit Stop 2, all the great games I used to, summer games, stuff like that. And you would be almost to the end of the download, then somebody picks up the phone in the house and it disconnects. And you're like, oh. And then you didn't get to just restart where you left off back in those days. You had to start from the beginning. It was a mess. Trisha says she also remembers the travel DVD player being replaced by the iPad. You want to talk about a device that skips? Yes, we were having this conversation this past weekend when I was on the cruise with Paige and Mallory. Of course, Pam didn't get to go. She had the first day of school on Monday, so I just got to spend time with the girls, which was awesome. Man, that was the best. But on the ship, they were showing Little Mermaid. And actually, we stayed at the Grand Floridian the night before, and they were showing the Little Mermaid that night as well too as the movie Under the Stars. When Paige was Little Mermaid was like her jam. It was her movie. And back then, remember, if you've been with the podcast for quite a while, I didn't fly until about 5 years ago. I was scared to fly. So we always drove to Florida, always drove. About a 15-hour drive from St. Louis. And so Paige, I got to give her credit. She never really complained. She always she did. And my wife, I got to say, my wife, Pam, she never complained. She didn't want to ride 15 hours. She would fly. She wasn't scared to fly, but she did because I was scared. So shout out to my family for putting up with me. But the thing was, I remember the one trip, Paige was 7. We took her best friend, Molly. They were both 7. They both played all sports together. They danced together. We were best friends with her parents and so forth. We were basically always together. But we drove all the way down. We took Pam's mom's Monte Carlo, because our car wasn't. It was like a Chevy. What was that? They don't make Cavalier. So, and it wasn't in great shape. So Pam's parents let us take their Monte Carlo, which was pretty new, which isn't a real roomy car, but it's a pretty sweet ride though. But we had one of those travel DVD players in the back seat, that hung over the headrest of the regular seat. And Molly and Paige watched The Little Mermaid, I got to say, probably 6 or 7 times on the way down. I mean, it would end and they just restart it. And I just remember them singing along, especially to Part of Your World. So anytime that song comes on now, it takes me right back to those adventures, because now going to Florida, going to Walt Disney World, now that we fly, it's about the destination. But there's a small part of me that misses that road trip, like driving at sunrise through the mountains of Tennessee, or just seeing all the fir trees in Georgia, or that first sip of orange juice as you hit the state line at the Florida Welcome Center. I miss that stuff, but then again, I don't think I miss it enough to drive 15 hours. So it's one of those things. It'll have to be a distant memory. I'll do it again at some point, but I know that I get like 3 hours in and be like, I'm stupid. Why am I not flying? So thanks for the feedback, Trisha. That's awesome. Sarah Reichert, she is here. She says, catching up on the BOGP, and will soon start your Patreon podcast. All right, Sarah, when you catch this one, you get to hear your feedback. Nice to keep a little Disney in my life. Is there a Discord for Patreon? Is there just for the $10 tier? Hope you loved your cruise. Can't wait to hear about the trip report. Yes, the Discord is for all of our Patreons, and I did post the link. Discord has really weird links, but I did post it under her message here for episode 61 feedback. So if you want to join the Discord, just go to Sarah's little message there under the episode 61 video feedback, and it is right there. Or just send me a message, mike@beourguestpodcast.com. I'll send you the link. No problem. Megan Green, who's always here with feedback, she also says, I remember the pizza at McDonald's, and not fondly. Does anyone remember the salad shakers they had there for a while in the late 90s and early 2000s? I used to get them all the time and made me feel better about the large fries and Reese's Cup McFlurry. I got along with it. Haha. Yes, I do remember the salad shakers. I don't think I ever got one, because back in those days, I was all about the nugs, the chicken McNuggets. And this sounds so terrible. I can't believe I'm going to say this. But I remember, like, in high school when I was driving, so this had been like my junior or senior year, after baseball practice, we get off about 6:30. I'd be so hungry that I'd drive my MGB convertible. I had a little orange 71 MGB convertible that my grandpa bought for $500 from a friend. Wasn't running. We fixed it up. We painted it bright orange. It was a cool. My uncle still has it. I need to get it back and fix it up. He doesn't drive it, but just such a great little coupe car for high school. But I remember after baseball practice, I'd be so hungry that I would drive to McDonald's, and instead of getting a value meal, I'd get the 20 pack of the McNuggets with like 3 barbecue sauces and just crush those. Yes, we ate terrible in high school. Thanks, Megan, for the feedback. Appreciate it so much. Thank you. And if you ever have any feedback about this show or any show, just go to patreon.com/BeOurGuestPodcast, find the thread, and then put the feedback in there, and I will read it next Thursday, because I love hearing from you. All right, so let's hop into today's show. Just a bunch of random topics that have come to my mind over the last week. Again, I haven't really had enough time to sit down and think of a full topic, which I think next week we're going to dive into an old KB Toys ad and talk about the toys that we enjoyed from certain years way back when. But today, I just want to talk about some things that have kind of popped into my brain. First of all, the cruise. You're going to hear about the cruise on tomorrow's Be Our Guest podcast. I sat down with Ricky 2 nights ago, actually, and we recorded just some of the highlights of the cruise. But let me give you some of the stuff that I couldn't fit into the cruise. First of all, I almost didn't go on this cruise for the fact that my wife was starting school, and I knew she would not be able to go because it was a Friday to a Monday cruise. Disney asked us a week in advance of the cruise if we wanted to go, to be able to sail and record some video and talk to our audience about what cruising is like right now in the fall of 2021. Basically, they wanted us to get the message out to our audience, to folks that work with our travel agency. They wanted us to kind of let everybody know what it's like. And the best way to do that's a firsthand experience with going through the process. So I had to let Pam Forrester sent me a message on a Friday morning as I was finishing my run. And she needed to know, do you want to take this cruise? And of course, my first instinct, yes, absolutely. Disney Cruise Line is my favorite Disney experience. It's better than Walt Disney World. I love cruising because I love seeing the ocean. I love being on a ship. They're amazing. So I had to tell her within like 3 hours. I had to also make this decision. What am I going to do like in a week? So I was initially just going to say no, because I got a lot of trips coming up. We're going down to Walt Disney World for the 50th. I'm going to be down for Wine and Dine Race, Marathon Weekend, stuff like that. But I did come in and talk to my wife before she had to head off to school. She was at O week during that time. And, she was like, well, I can't go. But why don't you take the girls? And at first I felt super guilty, right? Because we always sail as a family. I've never gone on a cruise without my entire family. It just doesn't happen. But she said, I got the first day of school, the day you guys get back into port. I can't take off, but the girls would really, really enjoy it. They haven't got to do a whole lot this year. So I was super excited. So I asked Mallory. Mallory was actually going to go with her aunt and uncle to Great Wolf Lodge that weekend. But I asked her, I said, if you want, we can go on this cruise, or you can go with Sandy and Andy to Great Wolf Lodge. And she loves cruising like her dad. So she wanted to go on the cruise. And then I asked Paige if she could get off a couple of days, the Friday and the Monday from Mizzou from working. And she did. And I'll just say, it was a great experience. I missed my wife tremendously. I love my wife and I missed her very much. But it was so cool to have that time to catch up with my two girls. Because, when they're 24 and 13, time with your kids is so precious, right? Mallory's always cheerleading, always at practice. She's on 2 squads, and she's 13. I mean, dad doesn't rank up there as high as dad used to maybe 5 years ago. And Paige, I mean, she's very good about trying to be very kind, to her parents, but she's 24. She's trying to find herself. She lives in Columbia, 2.5 hours away. Very busy schedule working with Mizzou basketball, but she decided to go with us, and that made, I don't know, if you're a parent, you kind of get it. Like, it didn't matter what we did on this cruise. It was going to be amazing. Whether we were sitting there eating pizza at 11:30, watching Star Wars on the Funnel Vision, you couldn't have told me that life could get any better, and it wasn't like I was eating the best pizza in the world, but it was pizza on a cruise watching Star Wars with my girls. Paddleboarding. I'd never paddleboarded, but they said, could we? I said, yes. They wanted to kayak. I had never kayaked either. They asked if we could kayak. I said, yes. I said, you want to ride bikes? We rode bikes. You want to go get cookies? We got cookies. We just had a tremendous time, but it was more than the cruise experience. It was just spending time with my girls, because time goes so fast. I can't believe they're 24 and 13. So if you have those little guys and gals right now, as a parent, it's going to go quick. Enjoy the times. And when you get it later on, take it. Take any time. Doesn't matter where I would go to, Kansas with my 2 girls. I'm not dogging on Kansas, but I go to South Dakota or wherever. I would go anywhere with them just to be able to spend time with them. Doesn't have to be a Disney cruise, but that was a bonus. I will also say about the cruise, I don't know if I got this in on the show. The crew of the Disney Dream were just so excited to have guests back on board. Their service was outstanding, and they were just happy to be back to their jobs and working with guests. And I saw that time and time again. It was so neat. Also, the ship sailed at about 40 to 50% capacity. That was great because plenty of room, didn't have to rush for anything. Lots of space. You didn't have to compete with a lot of folks. So we'll hear more about the cruise. I don't want to kill it here on the show because that's for Friday. But if you do have any questions, if you're thinking about cruising or if you have one scheduled, I'm here because now I've kind of gone into I try to get a piece of everything you could do on the ship so that I can be an advocate for you and give you some good information. So just let me know. Okay. Some of the things I've been thinking about. So right now we're definitely in the dog days of summer, right? We're in those last few days before school starts for some. Mallory's back at school. Pam's back at school. They started this past week. But as a kid, I treasured the very end of summer because I was a summer kid. As much as I liked school, and I didn't hate school. I mean, I became an elementary school teacher for 17 years, so I kind of had to have liked it. But I like summer better. I like the freedom of being able to ride my bike or hang out with my buddy, and not have to worry about the requirements that school had. Memorizing Bible verses where I went to school, or penmanship pages that we had to do, or math formulas that we had to memorize, stuff like that. It was just nice to have the freedom of summer. So I was thinking about what would I be doing here if it was, say, my last week of summer break. It's not the beginning of summer where everything's fresh. It's more towards where you just, my mom or my dad would be off, at work, and maybe I had a babysitter, and I would just have a lot of freedom around the neighborhood. And as I thought about like a typical day for me in the summer, I'm trying to, not a typical day, but what we did a lot that I really look back on fondly is one of the things I used to do quite often. And I don't know if you did this, but let me know. It kind of probably depends on where you grew up. But we would ride our bikes everywhere. And I didn't have a nice bike. My buddy across the street had a Diamondback, and I was so jealous of his Diamondback. That was like the coolest bike. I had a Huffy. I had a Huffy, but it had mag wheels. It had those plastic mag wheels. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was yellow and blue. I think the tires were actually blue. I know the mags were yellow. The frame I think was yellow, but I can't. It was either blue or yellow. But it doesn't matter. It was a decent bike. Didn't matter because we rode our bikes everywhere. He had a better bike, but I didn't care. We went everywhere. One of the things I remember is like a moment that like, okay, we're kind of growing up now, is that we had an elementary school by us called Duchesne, still there. I actually did some teaching there later on in life in our district, but we would ride our bikes all around Duchesne School in the summer. And it's funny because in elementary school in the summer, it's like an abandoned place in the world, like all year there's excitement there. There's cars coming, there's school buses, there's activity happening at this school. But in the summer when I was a kid, now the schools are pretty much open a lot more year round now. But if you went up there in August, it was just like, man, there's nobody here. Like there's not a car in the parking lot. And you would just ride your bike around the school. You peek in the classrooms and see what's going on in there, see all the desks stacked up. It was just like, it was eerie, but we always peeked in to see what was going on in the school. We'd, play on the playgrounds. We'd ride our bikes. We'd do all kinds of stuff around the building, but it was almost eerie. And then all of a sudden school would start up and the building had a life again and everything came back to normal. But we did that a lot. But I'll tell you the one thing that we did. I remember the first time. So where I lived, about 3 blocks over, there was a kind of a busier road. Now, it's not a highway or anything, but it was 2 lanes of traffic going one way, 2 lanes of traffic going the other way. It's called Florissant Road, aptly named. We lived in Florissant, kind of cut through our town. And on the other side of Florissant Road, near the intersection of where I lived, about 3 blocks away, there was a dairy called Burgeon's Dairy, which is now, if you ever know, it's the corner of St. Anthony and Florissant Road. It's called Duzel's Ice Cream. Duzel's Frozen Custard, I should say. But behind that, when I was a kid, there was a strip mall. And in that strip mall was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Now, you might think, who cares about kids going to a Kentucky Fried Chicken? But I'll tell you what, the first time my parents gave me like $5, and the first time Ryan's parents or grandparents, he stayed with his grandparents mostly, they gave him $5 and we got to go have lunch at KFC by ourselves. Man, I don't know if you remember this point of your life, but when you got to go somewhere, like a lot of times this was at the mall, right? Your parents would drive you off at the mall. You could go to the arcade, or you could go to like an A&W or a Hot Sam's or something and get something to eat. But in this case, and we did that, don't get me wrong. But in this case, we rode our bikes up and crossed Florissant Road, which is a big deal. It was 4 lanes, it wasn't just, the residential street. You had to be careful, cross at the light, so forth. But we went to KFC and we got the 2-piece meal. I remember that. And we were up there all by ourselves. No parents, no grandparents, no babysitters. We just sat, we ordered our 2-piece meal, probably a biscuit, mashed potatoes, maybe corn. I can't remember. A couple of pieces of chicken. And we sat in that booth for like an hour, just like we were kings. Like we were adults. We were probably 10 years old. But I mean, that summer day, it was probably like a Tuesday or Wednesday, Thursday, something like that, midweek. Just sat there having our chicken, thinking about we are here by ourselves, no supervision. And it was the greatest. I mean, that chicken probably tasted great just because we were there of our own accord. And I just remember that day still to this day, probably 37 years ago. And it was so fun because we had that first taste of freedom. Also, one of the things we do on a day like today is that we would ride our bikes up to the park. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but we had a park next to us that had a big county library. And I loved not necessarily reading books, but I loved doing research. I would go into the library. There was a distinct smell to our library. Here's one for you. This shows my age. I would go to the card catalog and look up tornadoes because I was fascinated by weather. And being from the Midwest, tornadoes were like our biggest threat. I just remember, and I don't know if you had this kind of memory, but we did in this park. Okay. It was called Bangert Park. Again, right off of Florissant Road. It was across the street from the school I was talking about, Duchesne School, about 3 blocks from my house. In the corner of the park was the tornado siren. Now, depending on where you are in the world listening to this show, you may or may not have had tornado sirens, but we had tornado sirens all around town. But the one at the corner of Bangor Park was the one we would hear from our house. Now, if there was something, and there still is kind of, I don't know, I'm getting into my brain here, and you're going to think I'm really, really weird, and I apologize for this. But when I was a kid, I was kind of scared of that tornado siren in the corner of the park. And for me, all it was, if you look at it, it was a big telephone pole, and at the top it had a yellow big, siren, like a big horn that would make the huge sound, and it would rotate 360 degrees so that it would get that really strong sound out around 360 degrees around that part of our town. But there were times that we were up at Bangor Park riding our bicycles, or in this park, it was also a tank, a decommissioned army tank. It was all welded shut. You couldn't get inside of it, but you could climb on it and hang off the gun, sit on top of it like you were riding it. We'd be playing on the tank or on the swings or whatever at the park. There was a basketball court, tennis court, stuff like that. They had a big swimming pool. You could pay money to go to the pool. But the thing was, now where I lived in St. Louis County back then, the tornado drill, the tornado siren practice was once a month, and it was on the first Monday of the month at 11 o'clock a.m. So if you just happened to be up at the park at 11 o'clock on the first Monday of the month, you weren't paying attention. You were like 8, you were 10, you were 11. You didn't pay attention to what time it was. All of a sudden that thing would come to life. And tornado sirens have different sounds, but this one that we grew up with, it was like really old school. And it just be like, it would like roar to life. And then to get this high sound, and it would stay there for a while, then it would go back down low. And it was freaking, it was super loud, and it just freaked you out as a kid. And you saw this thing spinning around, it's almost like it came to life. I remember though, one time with Ryan, we were up there just riding around, and we saw that it was getting ready to storm. We're like, okay, we still wanted to play because, kids want to play, but the storm was rolling in. God, remember back then, you didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have any contact. It's amazing. You had zero contact with your parents. You were just there, and they told you when to be home. And sometimes you got on there on time, sometimes you didn't. But the thing is, I remember like the start. It was in early summer. I would say it was like May or June, and we were playing at Bangor Park, just riding our bikes around. That thing came to life, and the skies were already dark. Like it was ominous in the late afternoon. And that thing came on. And the thing was, we were always taught this, and this is still true, I believe. So just a little weather information for you, that if the tornado siren goes off, that is a tornado warning. Okay. So now if there's a tornado watch that they'll put out, and that means that conditions are favorable for tornadoes, but no tornado has been spotted or noted on a radar. However, if there's a tornado warning, that means a tornado has been spotted, or it has been located on radar. Now, back when I was a kid, forget the radar part. We just thought if they set off the tornado warning, a tornado has been spotted. There is a tornado on the ground somewhere close. I remember that day because we were playing right under the tornado siren. Like we were in that corner of the park. It was right by the tank. I just remember like we knew we had to go home, but we're like, we'll play for another 5 minutes. We're boys. We're just like, we're good. We'll go home here. If it starts raining, we'll get on our bikes. Cause it was about a 5 to 7 minute ride, not far. That thing goes off, and like, it's super dark. And I mean, scared us to death. I remember we ran so fast to our bikes. Now this park was on the other side of Florissant Road. So we had to cross the 4 lanes of traffic. So I just remember that there was a stoplight by the park that you'd push the button and it would stop the traffic on Florissant Road, but it was never red unless there was a pedestrian or kids crossing, right? It wasn't an intersection. It was just for people to cross Florissant Road that were going to the park. I remember that when that thing went on and it just keeps going like, and it's going 360 degrees. So like it kind of gets quiet as it goes, 180 degrees from you, but then it makes the curve and it starts getting louder again, starts making you more scared as a kid. And we're waiting at that light. We're pushing that button so fast. come on, right? Change. And of course, it probably took 15 seconds, but it felt like 15 minutes. Finally, it changes. We jump across the Florissant Road, and I remember we got on our bikes and we were flying. We were crazy riding to get home, and we made it before it even started raining. But I do remember that storm. While there was not a tornado at our house or near us, there was hail, and there was big hail. But we made it home before any of that stuff happened. But I just remember to this day, because occasionally, remember, I'm like 17, 18 miles now since we moved a couple of summers ago from where I grew up. But Pam still teaches in that same school district. So that school, that park is in the school district where I taught, where my wife still teaches, and where we still have family. So occasionally I will pass this park, Bangor Park, and that tornado siren is still there. And to this day, irrational or not, that tornado siren still scares the crud out of me. Even though I know it keeps me alive, right? It keeps me safe. I will say where I moved, we're in a different county. We're now in St. Charles County. They do their tornado warnings or tornado drills at a different time. They do them on the first Monday of the month, but they do them at 9 a.m. They're early birds out here, so it's a little bit different. I had to figure that out here recently. Okay, one other thing before we get out of here, because I don't want to get these shows to get too long. You have 3 other podcasts, sometimes 4 to listen to on the feed, and I want you to enjoy those. These are just kind of fluff, as they say in Carousel of Progress. But today is National Dog Day. And I do want to remind you, actually, crazy. I just got a text from Mallory. She should be doing something at school right now. I don't know why at 11:14 a.m. she's texting me. I hope she's at lunch. But she just texted, it's National Dog Day. And I got to tell you, Pam and I are not really pet people because pets demand a lot of care. Not that we don't like dogs. We love dogs. But we've always been the type of family that didn't have a dog because they take a lot of work. They sometimes, cause damage to your home, your furniture, your yard, stuff like that. And so we've never had a dog. But, you've heard on the podcast, Super Dog Riley, you've seen her in my videos. That is Paige's dog. She somehow at Mizzou got this golden doodle. We still don't know the circumstances. She hasn't fessed up to exactly how she got this golden doodle because from what I've heard, they're kind of expensive. It's kind of sketchy how a college kid with no money could get this really nice dog, but we whatever. I don't pry. I try to be a good parent. And, she brought her home for the first time. We kind of fell in love with her, but we wouldn't, she couldn't do this. She couldn't do that. She had to stay here. On National Dog Day, I will admit, Riley has my heart. I love this dog. She is such the best dog in the world. And having a dog around this house, because Paige just had to switch apartments at Mizzou. Her lease was up, so she's moved. So she's moving into her new place this week. So Riley is still here, even though Paige is back at Mizzou working. And I will say I would keep this dog forever. She has won my heart. She's won my wife's heart, which is amazing. Mallory loves her because Riley sleeps with Mallory every night. And even though you will hear Riley sometimes pick up a squeaky toy and start squeaking it during the podcast, or there's an occasional bark because there's a knock on the door or somebody comes home upstairs. I love Riley. So I just want to say that on National Dog Day. So let me know, are you a dog person? Are you celebrating your dog on this National Dog Day? Even the most hard person that doesn't like to have pets around the house, I'm glad she's here. She keeps me company, especially now because Pam's back at work. Paige is back at Mizzou. Mallory's back at school. It's just Riley and I working here in the office. And she's pretty good at putting out those quotes for our guests at the Magic for Less. I tell everybody I've taught her to type. She's still working on her spelling, but she's a pretty good dang golden doodle. Love this dog. All right. I hope you're having a great Thursday. Thank you so much for your support. Hope we got to share some fun memories today. Hope we got to share some smiles. That's the whole goal of this whole thing. The Be Our Guest podcast, Mike in the Midwest. It's just that we can share some memories and maybe pass 30 minutes in a positive way and that we can support each other. I appreciate you so much. Whatever you do, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon. Thank you, everybody. See you later. Bye. And bye from Riley.